Sgt. Pepper's Musical Revolution.
Available now on BBC iPlayer.
BBC News now on BBC One with Hugh Edwards.
Tonight at 10, police named the third London Bridge attacker, an Italian man of Moroccan descent whose name had been flagged to the British authorities. He was 22-year-old Youssef Zaghba, who'd been living in East London. The British authorities were alerted after he'd tried to travel to Syria last year. And questions about another attacker, Khurram Butt, who'd been reported for violent and extremist behaviour.
I said that in my estimation, they are a national security threat. They are dangerous individuals. And that information was passed to SA-15 counter-terrorism police.
There was another arrest today in East London, but so far, 12 people have been released without charge. An Australian nurse, Kirsty Bowden, was the third victim to be named. She was killed as she ran to help others during the attack.
She never saw bad in anybody. Even if they were all having a bad day, Kirsty was the person that was going to make you smile.
This morning at 11, a minute silence observed across the UK for the 7 killed in the attack and dozens injured. We'll have the latest on the reaction to the attack as the Prime Minister claims that she would be ready to change human rights laws to tackle terrorism. Also tonight, an eyewitness report from Syria as fighters enter the outskirts of Raqqa, the city stronghold of so-called Islamic State. And with just 2 days to the election, younger voters have been sharing their views on security, on housing and on the future of the NHS.
And coming up in Sports Day on BBC News, England beat New Zealand to reach the semi-finals of cricket's Champions Trophy to keep alive their hopes of a first major trophy in 50-over cricket.
Good evening. All 3 men who carried out the terror attack at London Bridge have now been named. And during the day, the Prime Minister announced that a review would be undertaken by police and MI5 following concerns that previous warnings about 2 of the attackers had not been followed up. The third attacker was named today as 22-year-old Youssef Zaghba, an Italian national of Moroccan descent. The Italian authorities say that he was stopped from travelling to Syria last year and his name was shared with the British authorities. And there are further questions about another of the attackers, Khurram Butt, the man on the left there, who'd been investigated some 2 years ago. Our home editor, Mark Easton, has more details.
The faces of a self-appointed death squad. We now know the identities of all 3 men who went on a killing spree in London on Saturday night. Today, police naming this man, Youssef Zaghba, as the third member of the gang. Zaghba was born in Fez in Morocco to a Moroccan father and Italian mother. 22 years old, he recently moved to East London where he worked in a restaurant. But last year, he was stopped by security forces at Bologna airport in Italy on suspicion of trying to make his way to fight in Syria, literature relating to so-called Islamic State in his bag. Placed on the Italian terror watch list, UK police today said neither they nor MI5 regarded him as a person of interest. In Italy, a prosecutor claimed today the British authorities had been tipped off about Zaghba, who lived in this house in Bologna. One of his relatives said he'd hoped to find a job in the UK.
He went to London. He was away for 2 or 3 months, then he came back. He was here for a month and then he told his mum, "I'm leaving because here there's nothing and in London I can work."
The fact that Zaghba was a terror suspect in Italy adds to the pressure on British security services to explain why they were caught blind ahead of Saturday's terrible attack. Another member of the gang, of course, Khurram Butt, was well known to police and MI5, prompting searching questions as to whether more could or should have been done to prevent mass murder.
We will look at how the processes were followed, what they did. They will be wanting to look at that because they will want to learn lessons for the future if there are those lessons to be learnt.
Butt appeared in this Channel 4 documentary on radical Islamists last year, linking him to extremist preacher Anjem Choudhury, now in jail for encouraging support for so-called Islamic State. Despite this, security service interest in him was scaled down. The BBC has obtained Butt's CV, in which he describes himself as a motivated, zealous and trusted individual who'd worked in security, welcoming guests and securing buildings. He worked on the London Underground last year, Butt claiming his responsibilities included assisting customer evacuation where necessary. In Pakistan today, his uncle said he was ashamed and said his nephew's victims were constantly on his mind.
I don't know why they were killed. They came to the city to make their shopping, to make their dinners. Who will allow anyone to push them and to hit them and to die them? No religion allows.
Some have suggested the killings might have been prevented if any of the men had been subject to a court order known as a TPIM, restricting the movements of terror suspects who haven't been convicted of a crime. But the man who until recently officially reviewed terror legislation for the government says the orders are really aimed at a small number of individuals where strong evidence of terrorist activity exists but can't be used in open court for security reasons.
For that limited category of people, they're very useful. Where they don't help is in relation to people who can't be shown to have promoted terrorism or plotted terrorism, but who may be sympathetic to terrorists.
More detail emerged today about the last member of the three-man gang, North African-born Rashid Redouane. He was married to a British citizen and lived in Dublin for a time before relocating to East London. A house in Ilford was targeted in a counter-terrorism operation early today. At 11 o'clock this morning, Britain was encouraged to stop for 1 minute, to pause and to reflect on the events of Saturday night. Through the minds of many will have run the question, why did this have to happen? Mark Easton, BBC News, London Bridge.
A prominent organisation in the fight against extremism in the UK has revealed that last year a member of its staff was involved in a confrontation with Khurram Butt, one of the three attackers. Dr Usama Hassan of Quilliam International reported the incident to anti-terror police at the time. Our special correspondent Ed Thomas has been investigating what the authorities knew about Khurram Butt.
Known to police, known to MI5. And today, the BBC has been told of another warning that Khurram Butt was an extremist.
I had to run for my safety and perhaps for my life that day.
This is Usama Hassan. He says he came face to face with the London attacker here at this family fun fair to celebrate Eid in July last year.
He said, how dare you come to a Muslim event? You're a non-believer. He started screaming abuse at me. He said, you take money from the government to work against Muslims. You spy on Muslims.
His family took these photos of Khurram Butt at the Eid festival. After the abuse came violence. Physically, what did he do?
Physically, he tried to assault me. Yeah, he ran at me. Yeah, he ran at me with an expression of hatred in his face.
Did he touch you?
A scuffle broke out, and at one point I helped wrestle him to the ground.
Usama Hassan says he ran, while his family took more photos for evidence. He believes he was targeted because of his work countering extremism.
Very aggressive, he was full of hate. I felt intimidated. A bystander had told members of my family that we know this guy, he was kicked out of the local mosque, or he was banned from the local mosque for causing trouble there.
Did you ring the police straight away?
Well, I rang 999 as you do, and I said I've been the victim of an assault.
Usama Hassan also says he told officers he suspected the man who attacked him was part of the banned Islamist extremist group Al-Muhajirun.
Yes, I told them these are Al-Muhajirun characters. I said in my view they are a threat to national security. They must be monitored. They are clearly part of the pro-ISIS network.
And what happened?
He was eventually tracked down after about 6 months and cautioned. And of course I feel desperately sorry for the 7 victims.
We've asked the police to respond to these allegations.
Last night I couldn't sleep. I felt very upset and angry that we as a society had not been able to stop this man.
Regret, because within months, Khurram Butt would go on to kill at random, destroying so many innocent lives. Ed Thomas, BBC News, East London.
Let's talk a little more with Gordon Corera, our security correspondent. Gordon, given what we've now learned, what is your sense of the kind of questions that MI5 is facing?
I think more questions today about whether police and MI5 missed any opportunities. With the name of this third attacker came the claim from Italian authorities that they stopped him going to Syria and passed on these details to British intelligence. Now, that would have been to either MI5 or MI6. They're not confirming what was said to them, but it does make clear that he was in some way known to British authorities, but not under investigation. Now, Khurram Butt, we knew yesterday he was under investigation, but today, as we just heard, we learnt more details of these warnings from people about not just extremist behaviour, but what looks like violent confrontations. And I think that will raise questions about whether the accumulation of warning signs meant he should have been pushed up higher the priority list for MI5 and the police and put under more surveillance. Now, the police and MI5 here point to the context. They point to 3,000 subjects of interest, who they're investigating, who they're worried about, who they've got to prioritise because they can't follow them all. They say the threat is unprecedented, and they point to other people potentially planning attacks right now that they're investigating. And they still have this investigation into the London Bridge attacks. And part of that, I understand, at MI5 is reviewing what happened, if any opportunities were missed, and if any lessons need to be learned.
OK, Gordon, again, thanks very much. Gordon Corera there for us. Well, the Prime Minister says that she would be prepared to change human rights laws if that was necessary to fight extremism. Mrs May, who's been criticised by opponents for reducing police numbers as Home Secretary, was speaking this evening with just 2 days to the election. Labour said tonight that what was needed was more money for policing and for prisons. Our political editor Laura Kuensberg reports on the final stages of the campaign, dominated by questions over security.
The rallies, the battle buses, and him.
Minister of the United Kingdom, Theresa May.
This might look like a traditional Tory campaign, yet it's been anything but. Stalled by 2 terror attacks within weeks. So at the last minute in Slough tonight, a new promise.
I mean longer prison sentences for those convicted of terrorist offences. I mean making it easier for the authorities to deport foreign terrorist suspects back to their own countries. And if our human rights laws stop us from doing it, we'll change the laws so we can do it.
She's vowed to get on with all that on Friday, if you let her keep the red boxes. But she's been challenged on her own record on security in the days since the London attack.
Do you fear, as many members of the public might do, that there were intelligence failures in this case? Or do we have to accept in 2017 that no matter how hard we try, some terrorists may slip through?
The Police and Security Service have done a good job in foiling a number of plots, just 5 in the last 3 months, and a significant number since in the last few years. They will want to learn lessons for the future, if there are those lessons to be learned. Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you.
Security may be a political help as well as a hindrance to Mrs May.
We have the Tory party having to ask very serious questions about whether or not the security approach was good enough.
And we've answered those questions.
I think people feel a lot safer in their beds supporting Theresa May. I certainly do.
Beyond the smiles of the campaign, the oh-so-casual conversations, the most serious of subjects follow the trail's last few days. Yet Labour's crowd's enthusiasm's undimmed.
Jeremy Corbyn is cheered to the rafters almost everywhere he goes. But just as Theresa May faces questions about her security record, he too is under pressure.
Everywhere we go, the crowds get bigger.
Yet how would he combat terror?
We're all worried that this could happen again. That does require, obviously, vigilance, but it does require proper resources, and therefore cutting police numbers and not funding sufficiently those that are involved in security is a problem. And so we will put 10,000 more police officers available to go on the beat, because that also helps community safety and community confidence.
You can't cut 20,000 policemen off the beat and expect the same security you have before they've been cut. That's just not possible.
It's the ideological approach that Theresa May is taking, that we have to kind of police people's minds
It really is about numbers of people on the ground.
I think we need to just look after each other, love one another. I think that's more important.
A stridently different tone from UKIP.
Islamist extremism is a cancer within our society, and it is a cancer that needs to be cut out.
The Lib Dems also on the back foot in this campaign, urging caution.
Sadly, we discover that those people guilty of the pathetic, cowardly murders in Manchester and London in the last fortnight are people who are known to the security services. The question is not intelligence and new powers, it's having the resources to be able to keep us safe.
Security, though, one of the few issues that matters in every corner of the country.
We have an opportunity in Scotland to send a real message about the kind of country we want to be. Theresa May's on the ropes in this election. It's no longer inevitable that she'll get a bigger majority.
Events have changed this campaign maybe like no other. Few would have predicted this.
Can you bring it up, please, for our rally that's taking place in Brighton?
A Labour rally screened live in 6 places around the country. A rock star here, but we all determine who finds the pot of gold.
Let's go live to Birmingham tonight. Laura's there for us. It's where Labour's Jeremy Corbyn has been just finishing a campaign rally. One full day of campaigning to go, Laura. You were talking about tone in that report there. What's your sense of the tone and the rhetoric tonight?
Well, I think it's clear that although on Sunday Theresa May said enough is enough, she absolutely wanted to make it plain in the electorate's mind that she is willing to act more radically on the terror threat than the government has done in legislation in the last couple of years. And that's why she said in no uncertain terms that she would be ready to change the law on human rights if it meant more effective measures to try to crack down on terror. Now, technically, what the Tories say is she's not talking about leaving any of the human rights charters. What she's talking about is derogation, essentially opting out of parts of the human rights law. But Labour already tonight is accusing her of going back on guarantees that she gave on that. They're accusing her of a U-turn right at the very last minute of this election campaign. Now, that's flatly denied by the Tories. They say that they always had that wriggle room in their manifesto. And it's very clear that Theresa May believes that even at this late stage, very unusual to do so, it is worth sketching out more of what she would do if re-elected, because the nature of the threat and the rapid evolution of the threat means that if she wins on Thursday, that as the Prime Minister, she would have to change the government's approach. It's worth saying, though, also today, the Home Secretary, Amber Rudd, made a slightly different point. She said, unfortunately, whatever any government does, we can never guarantee that any terrorist might be able to slip through.
Laura, thanks again. Laura Kunsberg there for us in Birmingham tonight. Well, 2 victims of the London Bridge attack have been named today. Kirsty Bowden was a 28-year-old nurse from Australia who was working at nearby Guy's Hospital. A Frenchman killed in the attack has been named as 27-year-old Alexandre Pijard from Normandy. Across the UK at 11 o'clock this morning, a minute's silence was observed to remember all the victims. Our correspondent Alison Holt reports on the second nationwide silence in the space of a fortnight.
A time to remember, a time to reflect on an attack at the heart of London. Time to stand together on the streets where it happened. The ambulance crews who fought so hard to save lives, London's mayor at their side. Manchester still raw from the violence inflicted here just 2 weeks ago. And beyond. In these quiet moments, for some, the anguish is too much. Nicola Smith wanted to remember her former boyfriend. James McMullen was one of the 7 people killed on Saturday.
I feel anger, but I can't let that override my feeling of love for James and our memories, because I know that's not what he wanted. Me as a person, I'm extremely angry. But because I've been with James, I know that I can't let anger win.
James and Chrissy Archibald, a Canadian social worker, were the first to be named as having lost their lives. Today, new names and faces have emerged. Among them, 27-year-old Alexandre Piguer, a French national working as a waiter at one of the Borough Market restaurants. His mother is said to be devastated. And 28-year-old Australian Kirsty Bowden. She was a newly promoted senior nurse at Guy's Hospital who ran to help others that night.
There was absolutely nothing at all she wouldn't do for somebody. She never saw bad in anybody. Even if they were all having a bad day, Kirsty was the person that was going to make you smile.
And then there are the missing. 45-year-old Xavier Thomas was last seen on London Bridge. Tonight, detectives appealed for information as it's feared he may have been thrown into the river during the attack. Sébastien Bélanger's family are travelling to the UK from France to try to discover what's happened to him. He was last seen outside one of the pubs on Saturday. There's also no word on the whereabouts of Ignacio Echeverria from Spain, or Sarah Zelenak, an Australian in London working as a nanny. Her family has heard nothing from her.
Sarah's absolutely beautiful. She is a very special, kindred spirit. She's one of those people that doesn't drink, doesn't do drugs, doesn't do anything wrong. She's amazing, and she's 21 years of age.
These remain desperate searches, desperate days for so many who have found themselves caught up in this tragedy. Alison Holt, BBC News.
In Syria, fighters backed by US forces have for the first time entered the outskirts of Raqqa, that is the city stronghold of so-called Islamic State. The ground forces, made up largely of Syrian Kurds, have launched attacks from the east and west and north of the city after declaring a new phase in that battle. Our correspondent Rami Rahayem has obtained some rare footage from inside Raqqa and reports on the battle to retake the last IS bastion inside Syria.
The groundwork to capture Raqqa from the Islamic State group has been underway for months. Kurdish-led forces backed by the US have been advancing towards the city and sealing off access routes. And now, with the help of heavy airstrikes, they have advanced to Raqqa's eastern edge and are fighting inside the city for the first time.
We declare today the start of the great battle to liberate the city of Raqqa, the so-called capital of terrorism and terrorists. With the international coalition's warplanes and the state-of-the-art weapons, we will seize Raqqa.
Many civilians have already fled the city, but an estimated 200,000 remain trapped. Anyone living in Raqqa now faces the threat of airstrikes or the danger of being used as human shields, a well-known tactic of IS. And here is a rare glimpse inside the city. The militants' grip on their self-declared capital means we rarely get to see these streets. Despite regular airstrikes, they show a city still open for business, but one also prepared for the new dangers ahead. Sandbags line every house and business, preparations for the imminent ground assault and street-to-street fighting. In some neighborhoods, IS have set up sheets of canvas to shield their movements from aircraft. In Istanbul, we met 3 activists who say they have risked their lives to smuggle these pictures out of Raqqa. Abu Ahmed says the group are in constant contact with those still inside.
Wherever you go, there are tunnels. The city is on high alert. The mood is of war, of preparing for street fighting.
Civilians have been hit hard by US-led airstrikes on Raqqa. Exact figures are hard to come by, but Abu Ahmed says no one inside the city is safe.
People inside are the ones carrying the burden. They're being shelled and children are in a terrible mental state. The artillery shelling is close by. It's a city of death. Anyone can die anytime.
Fighting for the very survival of their self-declared caliphate, the odds are now stacked against IS. The battle is likely to be long and bloody as they hang on to their last stronghold in Syria. Rami Rohayin, BBC News, Istanbul.
Police say that they found significant forensic evidence in a car used by the Manchester suicide bomber Salman Abedi. The white Nissan Micro was seized by officers in the Rusholme area of the city on Friday. Police said tonight that Abedi made repeated trips to and from the car between the 18th and the 22nd of May, the day of the attack. They say he may have used items stored in the car to help assemble the device that he used to kill 22 people. French police say that they've shot and injured a man who attacked an officer with a hammer near Notre Dame Cathedral in Paris this afternoon. Officials say the incident is being treated as terrorism and that the man shouted, "This is for Syria." 1,000 visitors were kept by police inside the cathedral following the attack as the entire area was put into lockdown. Now, President Trump has declared his strong support for the blockade of Qatar led by Saudi Arabia. Air links have been cut and Qatari citizens have been expelled from several neighbouring countries. Mr. Trump says he agrees that Qatar has been supporting violent extremism. But as our diplomatic correspondent James Robbins reports from Doha, Qatar says that the accusations are a complete fabrication.
The unprecedented blockade of Qatar by her Arab neighbours emptied some supermarket shelves briefly, but there's no widespread panic. Queues formed as many flights in and out of Qatar are banned, with the Saudis leading this campaign against a fellow Sunni Muslim country they say is too supportive of rival Shia Muslim Iran.
James Robinson.
Qatar's foreign minister told me no one understands how it came to this.
What is shocking is the measures which have been taken against Qatar, and this it was like a collective punishment from 3 countries in this region, and by trying to block Qatar and even blocking the people of Qatar.
They say you're far too close to Iran, that you're supporting a country which is sponsoring extremism and terrorism.
Well, actually, we don't know what makes them thinking that we are doing this. We have taken our measures with Iran. We have a relationship with Iran, a normal relationship. We want a positive relationship with Iran. We don't want to have an escalation with anyone, not with Iran, but we want to resolve all our conflicts by dialogue.
But dialogue with Iran is no part of Donald Trump's agenda. Today he tweeted his full backing for Saudi-led punishment of Qatar. During my recent trip to the Middle East, I stated that there can no longer be funding of radical ideology. Leaders pointed to Qatar. Look.
So he seems to be pointing at you and accusing you in that tweet. Well, actually, regarding President Trump's tweet, we had the meeting directly with President Trump between him and His Highness the Emir, and he told us clearly we found that there are some allegations about different countries in the region funding terrorism, and we saw some of them is around Qatar and Saudi, and he repeated this several times. And we told him very clearly, if there is any allegation, we can sit on the table and we can sort it out.
But there's no resolution in sight yet, as all sides consider how to repair an alliance usually regarded as critical. James Robbins, BBC News, Doha.
Let's have some more on the election, and one of the last debates before polling day has been taking place in Manchester tonight. BBC Newsbeat hosted the discussion with questions from younger voters on security and on health and on housing. Our political correspondent Vicky Young was watching the exchanges.
We've heard a lot about the divide between the generations, with many younger people concerned they'll never have the same opportunities as their parents. This was their chance to put the politicians under the spotlight. Many in the audience had concerns about security and community relations after the recent terrorist attack in their city.
Due to the colour of my skin, in the wake of the awful terror attacks that have just happened in Manchester, I am genuinely afraid to go out into the city, my city.
It's nothing to do with the colour of your skin, and everyone needs to realise that. We need to deal with Islamism, and we've got to be honest about that.
But Labour accused UKIP of stoking up tensions.
That when a mainstream party like UKIP is putting out its so-called integration policy, which says that...
We need to integrate.
Sorry, can I speak? Which says that Muslim women shouldn't be able to wear headscarves. That if
No, we didn't say that. Burqas and niqabs. Get it right.
Okay. Can you see that a mainstream party saying that is actually exacerbating and normalising hate crime, which is why young people feel terrified?
Everyone should be able to be free to criticise an ideology.
I need to ask the politicians here, for young people as well, to not make this issue about extremism in the sense of it being an inherent part of Islam, but to look at it as a criminal thing as well.
And some opposition parties agreed that the role of the police was crucial.
And ultimately, cuts are a political choice. There are questions to be asked about where we best deploy our resources. And we believe that law enforcement at every stage of the process needs to have the resources to do their job properly.
What we also do need to do is prevent extremism of all forms from happening so that we can tackle this, and investing in youth services, in community service.
And what about the funding of other public services like the NHS?
How would you ensure that the NHS remains attractive for future generations to work for?
The top 5% earners in this country will pay 5% more. The 95 rest of us won't. And we're also looking at getting corporation tax back to levels that it was before. Because, to be quite honest, we all need to be investing in our country.
Conservative Party.
That sounds all very reasonable and wonderfully reasonable until I tell you that when we dropped corporation tax from 28% down to 19%, we actually brought £7 billion more into the Exchequer. Labour obsess about tax rates. We care about tax take, what comes into the Exchequer, so we can spend it on our NHS. You need a strong economy if you are going to have a strong NHS.
And no surprise that housing was an issue too.
There is so much we can do. The problem here is the political will to go and take on those investors who are pushing up the price of housing and making housing into commodities, not homes.
Okay, what do you make of what you're hearing?
So what we are planning to do is to promise 300,000 new homes a year. If the private sector, as the Tories rely on, does not deliver that, then the government must directly commission housing where it's needed to make sure we get up to that level.
All the parties are now waiting to see whether they've inspired younger voters to swing behind them. Vicky Young, BBC News.
And you can see the full debate shortly here on BBC One. That's coming up straight after the news, and it's at 11:55 for viewers in Northern Ireland. Now, as we've been saying, security, of course, dominating the closing stages of the election campaign. But as we heard in that debate, the economy, the future of the NHS and Brexit, they've all provided sharp dividing lines between the parties. Our specialist editors have prepared their own guides to what's at stake. In a moment, we'll be hearing from our economics editor, Kamal Ahmed, our Europe editor, Katya Adler. We're going to start with our health editor, Hugh Pym.
The election debate on the NHS is largely about England. Health is devolved, and the administrations in Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland don't have elections this time. Money is the dominant issue. How much more will be needed to cope with rising patient demand and the complex health needs of an ageing population? The Conservatives say they'll spend a bit more than under current plans. Labour and the Liberal Democrats are planning bigger funding increases paid for by specific tax rises. But some health think tanks say none of them have come up with enough. Staffing and recruitment is another major challenge. Labour and the Liberal Democrats both say they'd end pay restraint to allow bigger pay rises for NHS staff. The Conservatives want to see thousands more mental health staff recruited. As for social care, the debate's been dominated by a row over how much people should have to pay to be looked after in a care home or for carers to go to where they live, and how much of the bill the state should pick up. Longer term, in varying degrees, the larger parties have all called for greater health and social care integration. Well, that's fine in theory, but it certainly won't be easy to deliver.
Whether you're a voter out shopping or battling to be the next Prime Minister, there are three big economic challenges that are pretty familiar. That living standards squeeze, the state of the public finances, and that Brexit deal. The parties have laid out pretty different approaches, but there is one central promise from all of them. They will balance the books, they say, when it comes to government financing. The Conservatives say that only they can provide the foundations for a strong economy, for enhanced workers' rights and a good Brexit deal. But critics say that a Theresa May win would only lead to harsher levels of austerity for longer. For Labour, the talk is all about a fairer economy, fewer cuts, more public investment. Yes, they say that borrowing would rise and there would be higher taxes for the wealthy and for business. When it comes to the EU, they say they want a close relationship. The big challenge, do their sums add up? Now, for the Liberal Democrats, they have also pledged an increase in income tax and have said they will reverse those public sector pay freezes. For the SNP, they want higher taxes for the wealthy and more investment in those public services. Whoever we vote for on Thursday, the economic challenges will remain. Economic growth is slowing, prices are going up. Quite frankly, there are no easy political fixes.
Brexit will be a huge issue for whoever ends up in here. One of their first jobs will be to appoint a chief Brexit negotiator, pack them off to Brussels and get them to agree with the EU how often they'll meet, what they'll talk about and in which order before real negotiations can begin. And the new government will be under big time pressure because under EU rules, it only has until March 2019 to agree an exit deal, never mind a future relationship, trade or otherwise, between the UK and the EU. The larger parties differ considerably in their approach to Brexit. Theresa May promises to be a bloody difficult woman. The Conservatives want out of the European single market and out of the customs union, whereas Labour wants to retain the benefits of the single market and customs union, though it wants to curb European immigration. The Liberal Democrats insist that the Brexit deal must be put to a popular vote, whereas the SNP wants a new independence referendum so Scotland can stay inside the EU. And UKIP has been campaigning on a promise to hold the new government to account over Brexit. Whatever happens in these elections, the new Prime Minister and government will largely be judged on what kind of a Brexit deal they can get and what impact it has on lives here.
Three of our specialist editors there explaining some of the issues at the heart of the election. And by the way, you can read more details about where the parties stand on some of these big issues. There's a special section on the BBC website. The address is bbc.co.uk/election 2017. If you go to that part of the website and then follow the links. Now, among the many accounts of what happened late on Saturday night in the London Bridge area, there are tales of remarkable courage by police and other emergency services, but also by onlookers who just happened to be caught up in the violence as it unfolded. As our special correspondent Lucy Manning reports, some people had just a few seconds to react, and they did so without a thought for their own safety.
I've got slashes to the arms and hands, stabbed in the side of my stomach, chest. I've got slashes on my neck, head and ear hole coming off.
Roy Larner, football fan, a man who took on the murderers with shouts of "I'm Millwall."
Don't know why I did it, but I went back and you're not getting in here. Millwall in an Arsenal top one, and I was stopping them getting into the restaurant to stop them attacking the children and families in there. It's happened in about 20 seconds. As I got them out of the black and blue, the police were firing them straight away. So for me stopping them getting into and hurting more people, and for them being shot around me, I feel quite proud of myself doing what I did.
Spaniard Ignacio Echeverria also fought the three attackers. With his skateboard, he's still missing.
Shocking, you didn't know what to do, and the time flies.
His friend Will was with him. He didn't want to be fully identified.
He didn't even think about it. He just jumped there with the skateboard and started to fight with them. He was hitting the terrorist with the skateboard several times, like pa, pa, pa. And then next thing I remember, I was trying to approach to the group, but I realized that they were having massive knives, and one of them stabbed my friend Ignacio is a bloody hero. He's cracking man. I saw the policeman running to tackle them, but as soon as he got to the group, he got knocked. If the policeman in that moment had a gun, everything would be solved. Nobody would have injured.
Ignacio's family say they're in pain. They're appealing to British and Spanish authorities for information.
I'm with Jeff Ho, and this guy's a real hero. You know why? No, you are. I'm being real.
Jeff Ho with friends sitting up in his hospital bed, the stab wound on his throat still visible. The journalist who used his martial arts skills to tackle the terrorists, chatting about boxing.
Kovalev is going to do a lot better than he did in number one, but Andre Ward has got the skills and he's going to prevail.
Right.
Points.
In a statement today, Mr. Ho described how he took on the attackers.
The in the Arsenal shirt came at me first. I think I got a hit in on one of them, but either he or his accomplice got me with a shot to the throat.
Well, from the night there was...
Terrible injuries for many, the scars from fighting back. Lucy Manning, BBC News.
Some accounts of the notable courage shown there on Saturday night. Lucy Manning talking to some of the people there. And that's it from us tonight. Now on BBC One, it's time for the news where you are. Have a good night.